Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Al 24 News live from Algiers. Coming up next in the half hour. India has witnessed new cases of COVID-19 soar to nearly 250,000 as the country saw the largest single-day increase in infections since May 2021 plus. U.S. inflation hit its fastest pace in nearly 4 decades last year as pandemic-related supply and demand imbalances, along with stimulus intended to shore up the economy, pushed prices up at a 7% annual rate. Two weeks after the start of the winter semester in France, some 3/4 of teachers in France are striking today, Thursday, to vent their anger over the government's shifting rules on COVID testing for pupils. Also coming up in our world news program, Lebanese truck and bus drivers and others blocked main roads in the capital and other areas today in protest at the failure of politicians to address an economic crisis that has sent the currency into a tailspin and driven prices sky high. The Regional High Court in Koblenz, Western Germany, issued a life sentence against former Syrian intelligence officer Anwar Raslan, accused of crimes against humanity. We start this edition with this piece of information. The Algerian Ministry of Pharmaceutical Industry announced today, Thursday, the start of marketing the anti-COVID-19 vaccine CoronaVac, produced by the Algerian state-owned pharmaceutical group Sidal in collaboration with Chinese laboratories Sinovac. And still with COVID-19, but now in India, which has seen new cases of COVID-19 soar to nearly 250,000 as the country saw the largest single-day increase in infections since May 2021 as the nationwide surge in cases propelled by the Omicron variant continued to soar. Wednesday's case count means that daily cases have now grown more than tenfold in less than 2 weeks, a speed of rise in infections previously unseen in the 2 years of the pandemic in the country. And now we move on to another story. Pakistan reported more than 3,000 new coronavirus cases, a 55.5% increase from the day before, the first time in nearly 4 months when daily infections exceeded 3,000.3 additional instances were discovered in the last 24 hours, up from 2,074 on Wednesday. Positive sentiment increased to 6.12% from 4.7% the day before. The World Health Organization will consider whether to extend the global public health emergency today with the help of an independent committee of experts. The current public health emergency of international concern has been in place for almost 2 years due to the coronavirus pandemic. The committee planned to make a recommendation by the evening of the WHO, usually follow its advice.
More than 15 million new cases of COVID-19 were reported to WHO from around the world, by far the most cases reported in a single week. The sheer number of cases also means more pressure on already overburdened and exhausted health workers. Protecting those most at risk also helps to protect health systems and health workers.
In a new poll, a slight majority of Americans said schools should move to remote learning to prevent teachers and students from being exposed to COVID-19. A Harris poll provided exclusively to Axios and released Wednesday found 56% of U.S. adults said they support remote learning due to the risks of COVID exposure. Meanwhile, 44% of the respondents said it's more important to keep classrooms open for in-person learning to not cause interruptions in students' education. And now we move to another story here. And as Joseph Borrell, EU's top diplomat, accuses Moscow of attempting to drive a rift between the bloc and the US meeting between the US and Russia held in Geneva earlier this week, as the European Union was absent on the table. Marwa Belaiwa reports.
Geneva talks between the United States and Russia that discussed the future security of Europe went without the European Union's presence at the negotiating table. Although EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell warned earlier of holding talks without Europe's presence during his visit to the front lines of the conflict in eastern Ukraine.
Let me stress finally, in order not to make it longer, that there is no security in Europe without the security of Ukraine. And it is clear that any discussion on European security must include the European Union and Ukraine.
In a statement published online before a meeting of EU foreign and defense ministers in Brest, Joseph Borrell said that the bloc must now define what it can do to uphold the security order of Europe and the principles underpinning it, which he believes is under threat.
Russia has addressed to the United States and NATO proposal on the future of security in Europe that contravene the principles of the European security architecture. They are accompanied by military build-up on the borders of Ukraine and the open threat by Russia of taking military actions if these demands are not met.
The chief diplomat accused Russia of wanting to reconstitute the Soviet geopolitical glacis in Europe, declaring that Moscow wants to dissociate the United States and the EU for strategic reasons. Those tensions came to a diplomatic head this week. However, neither the US-Russia bilateral talks nor the summit between NATO and Russia appear to have yielded a progress. The European Union has grown frustrated that it has not been invited to the meetings by Moscow and Washington, and has accused the Kremlin of wanting to cut off the bloc out of discussions regarding Europe's future.
The prices of consumer goods in the United States increased by 7% in 2021, the largest since a rise in June 1982, which is a major concern for US President Joe Biden, who promised to stop this spiral. Hussein Berkan on what followed.
Official data showed that annual inflation in the United States rose to its highest level in 40 years, driven by high energy prices and damage to supply chains by the corona pandemic. The Bureau of Labor Statistics said in the latest data release that the Consumer Prices Index (CPI) in the United States, the main determinant of inflation, increased in December by 7% on an annual basis, the fastest increase since June 1982, when it recorded 7.1%. The CPI increased in November by 6.8% on an annual basis. The Bureau of Labor Statistics attributed this increase in the overall inflation rate in particular to the rise in the prices of housing and used cars and trucks. They stated also that food groups contributed to the rise in inflation, despite the fact that the prices of this group rose at lower rates in December than in recent months. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell responded that the central bank will use tools to support the economy and the strong labor market and to prevent higher inflation from becoming entrenched during testimony before the Senate Banking Committee.
The economy has rapidly gained strength despite the ongoing pandemic, giving rise to persistent supply and demand imbalances and bottlenecks and to elevated inflation. We know that high inflation exacts a toll, particularly for those less able to meet the higher costs of essentials like food, housing, and transportation. We are strongly committed to achieving our statutory goals of maximum employment and price stability. We will use our tools to support the economy and a strong labor market and to prevent higher inflation from becoming entrenched. We can begin to see that the post-pandemic economy is likely to be different in some respects, and the pursuit of our goals will need to take those differences into account.
The rise in inflation slowed to 0.5% in December, from a 0.8% increase in November. However, core inflation excluding food and energy recorded a monthly increase of 0.6% compared to an increase of 0.5% in November. This has been underlined by President Joe Biden in a prepared statement.
Today's report, which shows a meaningful reduction in headline inflation over last month, with gas prices and food prices falling, demonstrates that we are making progress in slowing the rate of price increases. At the same time, this report underscores that we still have more work to do, with price increases still too high and squeezing family budgets.
This increase in inflation rate would put pressure on the U.S. Federal Reserve, the central bank, to tighten monetary policy by reducing its holdings of bonds and security and raising interest rates. The inflation rate is currently much higher than the level targeted by the U.S. central bank at 2% in the medium term.
And now, 2 weeks after the start of the winter semester in France, some 3/4 of teachers in France are striking on Thursday to vent their anger over the government's shifting rules on COVID testing for pupils. This comes amid growing frustration over what unions say is lack of support and unmanageable logistics in the face of surging Omicron infections. To the Middle East, where Lebanon's series of demonstrations continue as a strike started due to the surge of fuel prices. A day of anger succeeded as roads blocked in several areas of Lebanon. Marwa Bilawar again.
In a continuous number of protests due to the deteriorating living conditions, anger erupted, leading to roads closure across Lebanon as another general strike was called by the land transportation unions in cooperation with the General Labor Union. The announcement called for an immediate implementation of a general strike in all Lebanese regions, protesting government unwillingness to sponsor the sector as an uncontrollable surge of fuel prices emerged. Many labor sectors were participating in the strike, such as the Vans Syndicate, the Farmers Syndicate, and the Truckers Syndicate.
The strike for drivers' unions, union leaders and land transport sector in general will not be halted by anything. What is needed is to begin assisting the land transport sector as promised by Prime Minister Najib Mikati and the concerned ministers, but they have not fulfilled their promise yet. The road transport sectors, federations and unions are members of the General Labor Union in Lebanon, and because the latter is holding elections for office, movement will be restricted between 6 and 10 a.m. to allow participation in the General Labor Union's election.
According to Lebanon's Traffic Management Center, several main roads in the capital were closed, as well as some roads linking Beirut in Lebanon's northern and southern parts. However, security forces have taken tight measures to keep a peaceful strike.
I call all the Lebanese and all the workers to participate in the strike as it is necessary.
Employees of many public and private institutions were advised to stay home, and Minister of Education and Higher Education Abbas Al-Halabi announced the closure of schools, institutes and secondary schools. The Association of Banks also announced the closure of banks.
The Regional High Court in Koblenz, Western Germany, issued a life sentence against former Syrian intelligence officer Anwar Raslan, accused of crimes against humanity. The officer is responsible for killing detainees and torturing thousands of others in a secret regime prison in Damascus between 2011 and 2012. An abrupt withdrawal of foreign aid last year following the hasty U.S. exit and Taliban victory in August left Afghanistan's fragile economy on the brink of collapse, with food prices rising rapidly and causing widespread hunger. The Taliban administration that seized control of Afghanistan proposed a joint body on Wednesday of its officials and international representatives to coordinate billions of dollars in planned aid. Over 2,000 Russia-led troops began withdrawing from Kazakhstan after being deployed when peaceful protests over an energy price hike turned into unprecedented violence, claiming dozens of lives. Ayadi Usama reports.
Moscow announced on Thursday that over 2,000 Russia-led troops began withdrawing from Kazakhstan. The withdrawal comes only a week after they were deployed to the ex-Soviet nation on the request of its president, who was seeking to disperse extremely violent mass protests. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Monday said the deployment had been crucial, claiming victory in defending Kazakhstan from what he described as a foreign-backed terrorist uprising. Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev said on Wednesday that Russian and allied forces played a very important role in terms of stabilizing the situation in the country during his first visit to the country's main city, Almaty.
Collective peacekeeping forces are starting to prepare equipment and material for loading into the plans of military transport aviation of the Russian aerospace forces and returning to the point of permanent deployment.
Kazakh authorities say order has been largely restored in the nation of 19 million and that almost 10,000 people have been detained over the unrest, with the hunt for others ongoing.
Without a doubt, it was of a great psychological importance in repelling the aggression of terrorists and bandits. The mission can be considered very successful.
The demonstrations started on January 2nd in western Kazakhstan, with local residents outraged by a sharp rise in fuel prices, and quickly spread nationwide. Descending into violence within several days, protesters stormed government buildings and set them ablaze, and dozens of people were killed in clashes with the country's security forces.
According to officials, landslides and flooding triggered by torrential rains have killed at least 15 people in southeastern Brazil. The victims died between the Sunday and Tuesday in the state of Minas Gerais, where rivers overflowed, partially submerging communities. Islam Sid reports.
In the Brazilian state of Minas Gerais, where at least 15 people have perished in the last few days, heavy rain of more than 200 millimeters in 24 hours has triggered more flooding and landslides in certain regions. The floods in Minas Gerais have affected approximately 55,000 individuals. Around 1,200 individuals have been relocated as a result of overflowing rivers that have flooded large areas. A landslide induced by heavy rain killed 5 people in the Brumadinho municipality, according to civil defense. The same sources said flooding from the rising Dos River in Governor Valadares municipality evacuated around 10,000 residents starting around January 12, 2022. Flooding has also caused damage to homes in other municipalities, affecting nearly 5,000 people. Since October 2021, when the rainy season began, Minas Gerais has seen periods of significant rainfall. The situation worsened on December 22, 2021, when other 13 municipalities, especially in the north, experienced significant flooding. Since October, over 28,000 people have been displaced, according to the Minas Gerais Civil Defense, and 341 municipalities have declared a state of emergency. 24 individuals have died as a result of rain-related disasters, not adding the fatalities that occurred earlier this month when a section of a cliff collapsed in Furnace Lake near Capitolio.
At least 18 have been killed and tens of houses have been burned in an attack targeted at a village in the center of Nigeria. The attack, which lasted for over 2 hours, occurred at night in the Ancha village in the local government area of Plateau State. Hussein Berkan reports. And we wrap up our news edition with the Peaky Blinders, or let me say gangster series of Birmingham, and which was among the top series of the OTT platform since 2014. The fans were desperately waiting for its last season for a long time. And now, after 2 years, here is the trailer of the season 6 with Abderrahim Kashur.
After a long break of 2 years, one of the most beloved series in the whole world, Peaky Blinders, is returning with its last season. BBC has released its trailer, and after the release, the fans seem happy because the series has all the big names returning for the season 6.
There for you.
What about security?
Yeah, well, about that. By order of the City of Birmingham Police Department, you and your ugly workforce.
The English TV series was delayed because of the pandemic, but now the season is ready to stream in 2022. As per the trailer Class, the gang is coming back together, and Cillian Murphy is shown leading his team. The trailer has given some tidbits about the Alfie Solomons, the character played by Tom Hardy, and his return is season 6. One of the show's most loved characters, Tom is Auntie Polly Gray, played by Helen McCrory, died in April 2021. She was 52 years old, and she was an essential character of the show. Helen McCrory played the role of Tommy's aunt, and in many scenes she has acted as the matriarch of the family. Kellyanne's outstanding performance held left the fans speechless, which was the primary reason for the show's popularity. But the series has some hidden facts, which are still a question for the viewers. Several scenes have made the viewers curious, so there is a list of the hidden truths that we never has an answer.
Take a good look, Tom. Because one of us isn't going to be here for long.
The series director Knight had admitted that he wanted to give the show an ending with a sound of war, and the plot was lies between the two world wars. The First World War had seriously affected the people, so World War II will be an exciting way to end the show.
This particular incarnation of the family story, I know that it's going to end at the beginning of the Second World War. But after that, I think that the momentum is such that maybe we will continue with other bits of the story.
At the end, there are many myths regarding the show Peaky Blinders. Some believe that the gang exists and extraordinarily ruthless and violent, whereas on the other hand, some believes it is just a fictional story.
And now it's time to have a reminder of our main top stories. India has seen new cases of COVID-19 soar to nearly 250,000 as the country saw the largest single-day increase in infections since May 2021. US inflation hit its fastest pace in nearly 4 decades last year as pandemic-related supply and demand imbalances along with stimulus intended to shore up the economy pushed prices up at 7% annual rate. Two weeks after the start of the winter semester in France, some 3/4 of teachers in France are striking today, Thursday, to vent their anger over the government's shifting rules on COVID testing for pupils. Lebanese truck and bus drivers and others blocked main roads in the capital and other areas today in protest at the failure of politicians to address an economic crisis that has sent the currency into a tailspin and driven prices sky high. The regional high court in Koblenz, Western Germany, issued a life sentence against former Syrian intelligence officer Anwar Raslan, accused of crimes against humanity. That's all for me, Nadia Kasmi, and the rest of the team. The news continues on Al 24 News. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.